So here's the deal, right? The BAFTA winner, who is called Villanelle in Killing Eve. She's a bisexual assassin. She's played by Jodie Comer. She's got hundreds and hundreds of social media complaints calling for her to be cancelled, right? Because she appears to be dating somebody who might support Donald Trump. Listen to those words carefully. Who might support Donald Trump. She's moved in with a guy called James Burke, where they've said to have met in Boston. He's now believed to have moved to Liverpool, where she lives. A picture posted online shows the pair on a boat with a group of people. A video, supposedly from her account, but tagged with Mr. Burke's Instagram username, shows her singing in the back of a car. And it may well be that he has previously issued words of support for Donald Trump. I mean, it's just too ridiculous to believe. Let's talk to Brendan O'Neill. Brendan, very good morning to you.
Hi, how's it going?
Yeah, pretty badly, actually, because I didn't really think it could get quite this ridiculous. I mean, you can sort of understand, the trans lobby getting worked up about J.K. Rowling, but to get worked up about somebody who's dating a guy who may or may not be a Trump supporter is quite remarkable, even for this lot.
It is remarkable. I think it really shows what a poisonous climate we live in these days, and just how incredibly intolerant, unforgiving, and actually pretty nasty people are becoming. I saw one headline in Newsweek. Newsweek used to be a respectable magazine. There's a headline in Newsweek which actually says, "Why is Jodie Comer being cancelled? ? Because her boyfriend might support Donald Trump." And you think, what planet are we living on where Newsweek is seriously reporting on the fact that an actress is facing cancellation, i.e. she's being demonised and people want her sacked, simply because of her boyfriend's alleged political beliefs? It's gone crazy.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, we've seen, of course, all of those people who used to march around on various Extinction Rebellion demos, and probably the same on Black Lives Matter. Never kissed a Tory. In fact, I think there's a few Labour MPs who have got that on their T-shirts as well. And I mean, it's a kind of a superhuman version of that, isn't it?
It is like that, and whenever I see those people in those T-shirts, I always think Tories probably breathing a sigh of relief when they see those people. But the thing is, it is like that, and it really shows, there was this old, terrible feminist slogan in the 1970s, which was "the personal is political." And I'm convinced that slogan really started the downward trajectory of modern politics, because now we have a situation where we don't have political life and private life. Everything is mixed together, and everyone's personal life becomes politicized. So your identity is political, the color of your skin, who you choose to sleep with, all these things have become political statements. And the more that private life becomes politicized, the more we have this psychotic situation where people make a political stance about the fact that they won't sleep with a Tory, they'd never kiss someone who voted for Donald Trump. So this mashing together of politics and personal life is actually giving rise to a really divided and difficult and intolerant climate.
Well, you probably know I speak to quite a few people very much like yourself who believe in what you believe in, which is basically freedom of thought, freedom of expression. Lawrence Fox was with us last Saturday when we did a show from the pub. In fact, we should have got you down there. I don't know what we were thinking. But, he was talking about how he may never work again as an actor because of what he said on Newsnight. And when you think about what he said on Newsnight, and I watched it again the other day just to remind myself, he didn't actually say anything which wasn't true. He didn't say anything which was in any way inflammatory. He didn't say anything which could have got him into hot water, legally. And it's just extraordinary that he now finds himself as a very distinguished actor, possibly never able to work doing his job again.
I think Lawrence Fox is a very good example of the problem with the current climate. So is J.K. Rowling, in fact, and a few others too, because what these people have done is said perfectly normal, perfectly legitimate things that huge numbers of people will agree with them about. So Lawrence Fox says, let's not obsess over everyone's race. Let's just treat people as individuals. That used to be the kind of thing that progressive people would say, but now you can apparently be cancelled for saying that. All that J.K. Rowling has said is that there are men and women. One cannot become the other, although we should treat trans people with respect. And she doesn't want people with penises to go into women-only spaces like domestic violence shelters, changing rooms and so on. That's a normal point of view.
It doesn't seem particularly radical, does it?
No, not radical at all. And there will be millions of people out there nodding along with her and horrified by the abuse that she gets and the abuse that Lawrence Fox gets. And I think what they demonstrate, and there are others too, they really show that you don't have to say anything horrible and racist and genuinely prejudiced to get cancelled these days. You simply have to disagree with the politically correct orthodoxies of our time. And if you disagree with those political viewpoints, you're in serious hot water.
Well, wasn't it strange in J.K. Rowling's case as well to find that when she did issue those, words of wisdom, which is what I'm calling them, all of the people who've made an absolute fortune as a result of what she created, i.e. Harry Potter, all the actors from Harry Potter came out against her. And they were like, hang on a second, you guys wouldn't even have any money if it wasn't for her.
I thought that was outrageous. I thought it was like a celebrity version of, in Stalinist Russia when people would denounce their parents. I thought it was just like that because, she's the mother of their careers. She gave them the fame that they've had. They got their fame through the Harry Potter phenomenon. And then they come out pointing the finger at her like crazy people in a witch hunt in the 1700s, denouncing her in public, distancing themselves from her. I thought it was so creepy, and it really demonstrated that we're entering a kind of Stalinist culture where everyone wants to point the finger and shame people and hound them out of public life simply because of their point of view. I thought what those three actors done was particularly shameful, and J.K. Rowling, to her credit, has handled herself with enormous dignity throughout all of this because she's getting misogynistic abuse. People are sending her photographs of their penises. People are sending her pornography. It really, really demonstrates that if you cross the line, as far as the woke brigade is concerned, they will do anything they can to try to destroy you. And I think that's quite a scary phenomenon.
It really is. And also, they don't give up, do they? Because they are supposedly the tolerant woke brigade, as you call them. But in fact, they're more intolerant, I think, than the Taliban. And people have been cancelled for saying that, for heaven's sake. But what about the other thing? I was watching Twitter yesterday. Noam Chomsky, who's described as a sort of US intellectual from the left. This is a guy who, as some people pointed out, more or less sort of defended the Khmer Rouge and the killing fields of Cambodia. But he thinks this has now gone too far.
It's that just made me laugh there. It's a strange situation where the thing about Noam Chomsky, the interesting thing about Noam Chomsky, for all his weird political positions in the past, including his slightly strange attitude towards the Khmer Rouge and others, he's always been solid on the importance of freedom of speech. And there's a great quote from him which says something like, if you're only defending freedom of speech for people you agree with, you're not defending freedom of speech at all. You've got to defend it for everybody. And that's the key point that these people don't understand. So when Rebecca Long-Bailey, for example, was dumped by Keir Starmer because she retweeted that article in which Maxine Peake said a comment which was interpreted by some to be anti-Semitic, all these leftists were rallying behind her and saying this is outrageous. But when someone on the right is cancelled, which happens far more frequently, or when someone who is un-PC gets cancelled, they're in the mob itself demanding the cancellation of those people. The key argument people have got to realise is that if we are all going to enjoy freedom of speech, it has to apply equally, even for people who are offensive, even for people we disagree with. Everyone across the board has got to have the right to express themselves freely.
Yes, well, Neil Oliver is on this show as well once a week, and he said the same yesterday. But he also issued what I thought was quite a chilling sort of warning, because he basically was talking about, culture wars and wars in general. And it doesn't take much for a war of culture like this to turn into an actual civil war of some kind, in which people actually start attacking each other.
Well, I've always thought that censorship is more likely to give rise to violence than freedom of speech, because what censorship does, it convinces people that they have the almighty right to never be criticised, to never be challenged, to never have their belief system called out or ridiculed or made jokes about. And that makes them intolerant. That licenses them to insult people, attack people, and sometimes violently attack people who dare to criticise what they say. Right. I mean, the perfect example of this is the massacre at Charlie Hebdo, because what we had there was the killing of people for the supposed crime of mocking Muhammad. Yeah. And that's where you end. If you protect Islam or transgenderism or any other belief system, if you protect them from any kind of criticism, you will convince people that it's okay to assault people who dare to criticize them. That's the real danger in all of this. One Guardian journalist said in response to the letter in Harper's Magazine about cancel culture, she said these are all just people moaning because they're famous people who are being criticized by ordinary members of the public. One of the signatories is Salman Rushdie. Right. He's been in hiding for 20-odd years because he's under threat of death from Islamist extremists. These people know a thing or two about the violence that can come out of this incredibly intolerant climate. And I think we've got to get a handle on all of this, defend freedom of speech before it does cross the line into something like violence.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I would hold up to the light with some scrutiny any Guardian writer who thinks they speak for the general public. I don't think they've ever met anybody from the general public. The general public who ring into this show certainly do not have a problem with freedom of speech, certainly do not have a problem with anybody saying anything. Most ordinary people are quite happy to listen to somebody's view and then either agree with it or disagree with it. They don't want to stop them talking.
Absolutely right. And that's such a central component of freedom of speech. People think freedom of speech is just about the right of the individual himself or herself to stand up and say something. That's obviously a central part of it. But it's also about the right of the audience to listen, to weigh up the ideas for themselves and to decide for themselves if it's a good idea or a bad idea. What censorship does, it infantilizes us. It turns us into children. It says that there are certain things you should never hear or see, and we are going to protect you from them. So it turns guardianistas into these kind of moral guardians who must protect the rest of us from being offended. It's incredibly paternalistic, incredibly censorious, increasingly poisonous, and we've got to start pushing back against it.
I think we do, and I think with the help of people like yourself, Brendan, we are going to do that. Because the other side of that coin is that not only do they want us not to see certain things, they also want us to see certain things. So they will continue to push their agenda, as they do, for example, through shows on television, as they do through shows on radio, as they do through movies, as they do, like when they cancelled smoking, for example. Nobody's now allowed to smoke in a film. Why the hell not?
Well, that's exactly right. The reason they engage in this kind of censorship, they don't do it for fun, although I'm sure some of them might do. It's because they want to clear the way for their own agenda. That's all there is to it. The reason they want certain people not to be allowed to speak on campuses, the reason they want certain people banned off TV, the reason they'd probably like to see people like you taken off the airwaves, there's a sinister motive behind some of this, which is they want to clear the decks so that they can get up there and promote all their woke nonsense and authoritarian, authoritarian nonsense and all this other stuff.
It's not easy to stop swearing when you start talking about this stuff.
It's very difficult. And basically they want to re-educate the public and turn us into mini versions of them. That's why freedom of speech is so important, because we need those competing ideas and we need to defend our own ideas and use them to fight back against these new authoritarians who are a menace to public life.
Do you think it is something to do with anything other than virtue signalling, so that they can tell their mates how virtuous they are? Because I wonder sometimes if there's more to it. I know some of them are making money out of it, because I don't think I've ever seen so many people working in charities in my life, or think tanks that sort of purport to be sensible but in fact are pushing some weird agenda. There's more and more of these kind of millennials working in jobs which have been created as a result of this kind of groupthink.
I think virtue signalling is a part of it. They all love to advertise how decent and wonderful they are.
I mean, look at Prince Harry, for example.
Well, exactly. Prince Harry, under instruction from Meghan Markle to be as publicly virtuous as possible. Right. So that's a central part of it. But I do think there is something else going on, something far more serious. And that is a situation in which, the education sphere, the universities, popular culture increasingly, the BBC, all of these institutions, which really are the institutions that promote ways of thinking, promote ideas, promote culture, they've all been taken over by this new ideology. They've all fallen victim to this idea that there's only one way to think about race issues, one way to think about gender issues, one way to think about sexuality issues, and anyone who deviates from these correct ways of thinking is a bad person who must be punished. All of those key institutions in public life are now adhere to that outlook, and that's the thing that's really worrying, because it shrinks the space in which the rest of us, which I think is the majority of society, in which the rest of us can push what we consider to be important ideas. And I think a lot of people are sick of the divisiveness of identity politics. They're sick of being told that they have to think racially all the time, and they would rather just treat people as individuals and treat everyone equally. They're sick of being told that someone with a penis who puts a dress on is instantly a woman, and they want to stand up and say, we don't agree with these things, we don't believe these things, and we have the right to express our dissent from this ideology that you're pushing down our throats.
Yeah, absolutely right. Brendan, a pleasure as ever to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Brendan O'Neill from Spiked Online.